if I could do anything, I would sing. I was like, but, singing, like Sister Act 2, singing does not pay the bills.
Nope. This conversation started wrapped around being a woman in the industry, a Black woman now in the industry.
Yes. Lord, today this is exhausting. Being a Black woman is exhausting today.
Yeah.
And I'm irritated that you would let it be like this. So what can you tell me at this time? I think one of the hardest things for me as a believer who is in skin that is Black is that...
Hey everybody, this is Rita Springer. Welcome to the Rita Springer podcast and another episode of Worship is My Weapon. I am so excited because there's another worshiper in the house. Janice Gaines is here.
Hello.
We've known each other for a little bit.
Yeah.
And but I really don't know your history. And I was asking you if do you ever share your history? Do you do podcasts?
I do. And I think I've probably shared bits and pieces depending on the context. But yeah, I don't mind sharing my
I know
history
we've done the Better Together stuff.
Yes.
And where our focus is these certain subjects.
Yes.
And then we'll bring in some of the elements of our life stories.
Yeah.
But I don't know that. And I think that's where in some of our conversations I've known you're from Memphis, Tennessee.
Yes.
But I don't know like your background into music and stuff like that.
Well, I my dad is, let's say, the senior bishop of the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, CME Church, right? He's a senior bishop and has been for some years now. But growing up, he was a pastor and just full on itinerant pastor.
Like denominational,
CME.
So in the Methodist. Mm-hmm. Oh, you
very similar to AME. Mm-hmm. But in Memphis, there is the music kind of brings in other denominations. So
interesting. From
Kojic to Baptist, especially Kojic in Memphis. So when I was a teenager, I sang in this community choir that became a professional choir, Orlando Draper and the Associates. And I was a teenager, like probably the youngest member at the time. And most of the people in the choir were Kojic. So all of a sudden, my worship expression changed because in the Methodist church, and for a while, I had been Seventh-day Adventist, this is jumping around. But my mom, I'll come back to the choir, but my mom is a musician. She's a singer, songwriter, pianist, brilliant. And we grew up with her playing in church and in top 40 bands, right? So we'd be me and John, my older brother, would be at, I'm talking clubs, weddings, party, all kinds of things where we probably...
Smoky lounges.
Oh, yeah. Legally shouldn't have been in the back playing checkers,
Wow.
Just bored, trying to keep each other company. But my mom decided at one point, because she was, supporting us as a single mom, her and my dad divorced when I was probably 6. She decided, I'm going to play at a Seventh-day Adventist church because that way I can play on Saturday and Sunday.
That's why.
Mm-hmm. And so we started.
Was she getting money from that too? Were they paying her for?
Oh yeah. She's not showing up to
play for nothing.
For the minister music, Jackie's not showing up, for free unless the Holy Spirit led her to. And she was supporting children. So she would, gig weekends were her thing, where it was like, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. She might have some gigs in the evening, wake up.
So that was kind of her full-time deal.
Yes. A gig might go to 3 or 4, I feel, or, the gig might go from 9 to 1, but she's got to set up and break down. And so we might not leave until 3 or 4
a.m.
in the morning. And then church is at 11. So it's like those were her weekends. And so
this is like a movie.
It's quite a movie. So that was childhood. It was Methodist history from my mom and dad, because both of their parents were CME pastors.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So CME runs deep in my family. And then my mom, the music side, and the SDA coming through, the Seventh-day Adventist coming through her getting a second job. But then by the time I was a teenager in that choir, I was singing with people who were Kojic. So just soaking in every side of Black church tradition, right? And just soaking it all up and expressing different ways. Because in the Methodist church, getting the Holy Ghost might look like, and just, a little snatch, and then they come over and fan her, the ladies in white.
Oh my gosh.
But in Kojic, it's like full on dancing and falling out. And
wow. But the Holy Ghost was always a part of everything.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Because I don't think you get to see that in a white Methodist church.
No. It's like every once in a while, Sister so-and-so just couldn't keep it, and it just created a squeal and a shake, whatever. But it was there.
Oh, my gosh.
So that was, that was the beginning musically, just kind of all of those traditions stacking up. But at the same time, I was good in school. Like EJ and I met, at a math and science summer program. We were nerds. So
like in high school?
Yes. So he was from Chicago and I was from Memphis. But we did this summer program in Massachusetts for 3 summers long. 6 weeks.
Wait, you've known EJ that long?
Since we were 15. Yes.
Okay, so just for reference, Janice is married to EJ Gaines. EJ is now running Tribal, right?
He's running Insignia. So Insignia owns Tribal and the touring entity, and it's a media entity. It owns a film and television side.
Yeah.
Owns a film and television side. And so he is now head of that.
And he's been doing that for a while. And prior to that, he was with Motown.
Prior to that, he was with Capital CMG and he was head of marketing there.
Yeah.
And he's by trade an attorney. He's really, really smart and is always doing lots of things.
So you guys met at 15.
15.
In the math
and science program, summer program in Andover, Massachusetts at Phillips Academy.
Wow.
Yeah, and so at that point I thought I should do math and science because music and ministry seem a little hard, or it doesn't seem like you can do the things that you want to do. I think I was itching to, I don't even know what it was, but to just get away and discover the world. And I knew I had to have money to do that.
Yeah.
And I was like, it doesn't look like ministry and music pays you extra to see the world. So I think,
wow, yeah.
I think I'm going to choose math and science.
Yeah.
But in my college entrance interview, the interviewer asked, she said, if you could do anything in the world and you didn't have to worry about money, what would it be? And my best friend at the time, and she's still one of my besties today, Cha, we were doing that interview together. So I knew I couldn't lie because I'm like, she's sitting right there and she knows me. And so I was like, well, if I could do anything, I would sing. I was like, but, singing, like Sister Act 2, singing does not pay the bills.
Nope.
Nope. I'm telling you, in singing,
it's an illusion. It's
the
like
Lord pays the bills when you sing.
Yeah.
The Lord, He pays the bills.
when you actually are really doing it for the Lord.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and then I went to college and I majored in economics. I made up like
what college?
Oberlin College in Ohio.
Okay.
And everybody goes there who's musically inclined to do the conservatory. Not me. I went for pre-med.
Wow.
And
so that mathematics kind of rolled itself into the medical part of it.
It did. And then it's hard to not be authentic in college, like to apply yourself to something that you actually don't want to do. And I think it was a biology class, or we had this whole section coming up on botany, and I thought, I have to learn about plants to do this. I'm not interested. I'm not interested.
Oh gosh.
I don't know what I just thought I don't want to do pre-med anymore. So I did economics, and I made up a second major in music that tied music and religion and African American studies, which I wanted to be my major.
How sweet. You were just still trying.
That
dream was still on a thread somewhere.
I know. And my dad was like, what are you majoring in? And I told him I'm going to make up this major. And he said, sweet girl, you do not go to a $40,000 a year institution to make up your major. you will leave with a major they have chosen for you. You may add that in addition to what they have offered you, but you're leaving with a major that they have offered you.
What did the major end up just being?
It ended up being it ended up being, I can barely remember it now, which is to his point. It's like, what are you gonna do with that?
Right.
Now, to my credit, I've also not done anything with economics. So, but from there, at the end of college, I'm so grateful. I knew enough to say, Lord, what do you want me to do next?
Yeah.
Right? And he was like, seminary. I was like, seminary? And I literally said to the Lord, oh, guys like my dad go to seminary. And he was like, and you? And I was like, okay. So I went to seminary about 45 minutes down the road from Oberlin at Ashland Theological Seminary. And I went there like, okay, surely I should just do music here, since I've sung in church all of my life. And my concentration was, I was getting a Master of Arts in theology and worship is what I was intending to do. And that was my goal until I got to probably, I would say my second year. And I was like, I kind of really want to take the languages. Like, I want to understand Greek and Hebrew. Like, I want to be able to open the original text and know what it's saying.
Wow, yeah.
And I liked taking languages. I'd taken Latin in high school and Italian in college, all ones that nobody speaks, maybe except for one country. That was not a good idea. I'm the only person who's taken like ancient languages and like Italian. That's it. One country. I can go to one country
In order to
and understand and go to the bathroom. It's like EJ did Spanish, but EJ's always thinking ahead. But so I took Greek and Hebrew and I loved it. And then by the time I was entering my third year, I was like, wait a minute. I'm only a cohort away from getting an MDiv, a cohort of, learning about what it means to minister to people in leadership and counsel people and all these things.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, let me sign up for it and see. And so then I ended up leaving with an MDiv, even though I never intended to come out.
Yeah, because I wondered if I thought in the back of my head, I thought maybe you had like a psychology degree.
It's an MDiv.
But it's an MDiv.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know why, like my dad is one of those guys who empowers the daughters that he was given. And so I don't know why, but I thought, well, if my dad got an MDiv, surely I don't need that because I don't intend to be doing what he's doing.
Right.
But the Lord had
allocated to whatever you see.
Mm-hmm. And the Lord was like, go ahead, And so since then, I have two younger sisters. They're twins. They've gotten their MDiv and now they're getting PhDs. And it's like, I can see the fruit of my dad's obedience, then my obedience, and then my younger sisters being like, well, if Janice can, then I can. And then them taking that even further. It's amazing to see.
Beautiful, yeah.
But after that, though, it seems so disjointed until I actually began to realize what the Lord has actually asked me to do. Because after finishing my MDiv, EJ and I knew we were going to get married because we had been friends and connected the whole time. And that's a long story that I'm glad he's not here to tell because it will go my way. Anyway, but eventually we knew we were getting married. He was in New York, finishing law school, and he already had a job on Wall Street. And I was like, well, I can't quite beat that with an MDiv, so I guess we'll be living where he has a great job. And I went to New York and I taught 7th grade math in the Bronx for several years.
When you were first married to EJ?
When we were first married.
Wow.
Yes. And
with your MDiv?
With an MDiv. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
How was that experience?
It was...
I mean, that's kind of like Sister Act. You know what I'm saying? Like...
Yeah. Yeah, I was Sister Mary Clinton. No. Just without the habit. It was rewarding and challenging and rewarding again. Like, I can't say enough about how much I still love those people. And they're adults They are married with kids. Some of them are in the military. Some of them have gotten in trouble,
Yeah.
but it's just, I mean, I adored them and they adored me. Now I had strict classroom management because I'm only 4'11" and a half,
Yeah.
not even
Yeah,
quite 5
yeah.
feet. So I was like, they're all bigger than me. So I have to be the adult in the room. But they knew that I loved them.
Yeah.
And I was just committed to being the person who they looked at for hours of the day and knew that they were loved, that they wouldn't have to worry about eating. They wouldn't have to worry about anything except for learning math. Close your mouth and learn this math.
Yeah.
I will help you, but you have to listen. And so it was lots of things. It was exhausting because I was also in a program called New York City Teaching Fellows, where you teach and you get your teaching degree at the same time. So I was teaching from 7 to 3, and then I was taking classes from 4 to 10. Mind you, the man who worked on Wall Street was coasting. It doesn't seem like it would be. Like Wall Street sounds like 80 hours a week. It was like, no. I was doing the 80 hours. And like EJ was like, every once in a while, oh, can you come to a happy hour to talk to the clients? So he would be home cooking dinner. I would be trudging in at the end of the day. Like, is there any dinner left?
And in that season, your musical dream is kind of like off in the distance.
It is not even on my radar. And it only, 2 things brought it to the forefront, and that one of them being Monica Coates, who also used to work at Capitol. She and EJ have been friends for, at this point, 20-something years. And so even before they worked together at Capitol. And she had said, hey, can you and Janice, I wrote a book called The Beginner's Guide to the Gospel Music Industry.
Wow.
Can you and Janice read the draft? Each of you read the draft. And so I was like, yeah, absolutely. So the first chapter was about surrendering to the Lord. Like, if you want to be in this industry, because Monica Coates does not play. She's like, you want to be in it? Ask the Lord what he wants you to do and where he wants you to go, what kind of artist he wants you to be. So, or even does he even want you to be in the industry at all? And so I thought, if I'm going to be a good draft reader, I should do the exercise and ask him what he wants me to do.
Yeah.
So it makes so much sense. But to me, it did. I asked him and he was like, I want you to sing. And I was like, no, come on. Now, we talked about this. Like, at that point, I thought, I'll teach here, then I'll apply again. Because I had applied to do a PhD program, and then it was either go to New York and, get married there, or go to Atlanta and do like a long distance relationship while I pursued a PhD. And I knew I was supposed to get married and go to New York. So I was like, maybe eventually I'll apply again and do a PhD program and be a professor at a university or something.
Because at that point, you're exercised in the education of it. You can do it.
Exactly.
So you're just like driving.
Why not? Yes, I can drive this car myself and do what I want to do, basically.
Wow.
So it was that, reading that book and the Lord crashing in that way to get my attention. And then I would sing to my students. And I would say to them, if you behave this week, on Friday afternoon, I'll sing you a song. And those jokers would behave and be like, you promised you would sing us a song. And I was like, now they don't give any compliments undeserved.
Not those.
Not
that age bracket.
No, not that age bracket, not that neighborhood, not that color.
They're gonna tell you suck if you
they
suck.
were like, you're terrible. And we're going to kick our feet up and laugh at you while you do this. And they would genuinely want to hear me sing and sit quietly to do it and be like, some of them with tears and just emotion. And I'm like, and the school I would say, hey, listen, I don't know nothing really but hymns. Can I sing hymns to the kids? This is a public school, I know, but do you mind? They were like, we don't mind. Sometimes the administration would come in. My principal, the first one that was there, he looked at EJ and he was like, why is she even here? Like teaching these kids.
Yeah.
And I would be like, what? What are you talking about? And so that, what the Lord asked, and then realizing maybe it is special. Because I mean, everybody in my family can sing.
Yeah.
Everybody in Memphis can sing.
Yeah.
So I just thought, you can sing, but that doesn't mean you should.
Wow.
And that was it. And that was when the Lord was like, I want you to take that leap of faith. And I was like, okay, I guess I will. And through some circumstances, we ended up moving to Nashville, which we wanted to do 5 years later. Like we were like, in our 5-year plan, we'll move to Nashville. And the Lord was
Now,
like,
what
it's
was
now.
was the music industry part of that 5-year plan, or was Nashville? Did Nashville hold some other?
So growing up in Memphis, my mom is a musician. She would travel to Nashville sometimes to do sessions. So she would do session work in Nashville and Brentwood and Antioch and for different gospel projects and stuff. And so in my mind, I know that there's music to be done in Nashville, and not just country and not just CCM. Like there's music to be done.
Yeah.
And, I was a liner notes kid, so I knew all the background singers and all the musicians in the city who made a living doing this. And my mom had sung with some of them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we thought, okay, if you want to sing, we can go there. And EJ was like, I can try to do the business side of the industry from there, because he always wanted to. And he always wanted to do music about the Lord, because he got saved in college. And through gospel music. So it was a passion of his. I think he was supposed to intern for Jive. And he said, but you have a gospel label named Verity. Can I switch? Like, I don't want to. He was like, I want to go make the Jesus music. And so they were like, nobody asked to switch in that direction, but okay. And it was the beginning of his career, because he was like, gospel music means so much to me, because that's where I first heard the gospel, is through songs like the Winans. Like, it was not a haphazard event or a secondary scheme, but it was the plan of the Lord to redeem.
Because he's not like a musician, singer.
Well, he is. When we were teenagers, he wanted to sing, and he gave that up because he was like, I don't think the Lord's calling me to. I think he's calling me to do this instead.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Wow. Was your brother John here by that point?
John was here for a second, then moved back to Memphis, and then came back a couple of years later. So we were like, we just got here and you're leaving, get back here. So, but eventually he came back. So yeah.
Wow. So before you have kids, you come back to Nashville.
Yes.
And he goes to work for Verity.
Not yet. So that was in New York when he interned for Verity.
Okay.
He worked for Pastor Donnie McClurkin. And then he said, this is so terrible, I'm going to law school. They laugh about it now. But he went to law school, and then he worked on Wall Street. And then we came here, and we didn't have jobs.
So you didn't have any jobs when you came here?
Nothing. This is not even our personalities. You know us at this point.
Yeah.
You're like,
you
can you imagine?
Safety.
Yeah, we're like,
you're a safety net kind of
yes,
girl.
we are. But we were like, we kicking our feet, like jumped off. I mean, leap of faith all the way.
Wow.
All the way. And we got here. I finished my last day of teaching on June 30th.
When? 2000?
This must have been 2009.
Wow.
I think it was 2009. And we moved here July 1st. We literally packed the truck that morning and drove through the night and got here. And by September, we had started going to Grace Chapel at that point, because we were supposed to visit tons of churches. But we came, and Steve Berger was preaching a series on David. And we were like, well, we got to come back next Sunday to hear
Grace
the next.
Chapel, to me, with your history, is such a wild choice.
That makes sense.
Out there in
Leapers Fork,
White, Tennessee.
Yes.
It's the whitest church that I've ever been to. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's so different from the Methodist church.
It is. It's so different from the SDA church. It's so different from the Kojic people that I grew up with.
But it was the message that you heard.
It was the message that we heard. And I want to say this about Grace Chapel is that, we got there and we loved and were loved.
Yeah. Yeah.
For over a decade.
Yeah.
And so that was our home, and it felt good to be there. Yeah. So that is what I want people to know about me and Grace Chapel. You know what I mean?
It's like Grace Chapel was special.
It was special.
Yeah, it was a special place.
And for whatever has happened, we were loved and we did love in that place.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because it seems like a far left or a crazy direction to have gone in. But my seminary was the place where I made peace with being in a white space and being able to love white people well and be loved by white people too. Because in Memphis, so many things were segregated that it just didn't come into play. Apart from my teachers in school, everybody was Black. And even in our summer program where EJ and I met, it's math and science for minority students. So we were a group among a white town with international students. Our program was pretty tight knit. And even in college, my community was a community of color, right? And in seminary, I remember thinking, oh, Lord, it ain't nothing but white people here as far as I can see.
Yeah.
I am rooming with a white girl, and not that I hadn't before, but it's different when you throw Jesus on top of it, right? Mm-hmm. Like at Oberlin, very liberal. Everybody's doing whatever they're doing. Mm-hmm. Nobody really cares about you, but you live on campus at seminary. There's an expectation for integrity and things that you're like, oh, I have never lived this way with this many white people before. And I remember the moment where it occurred to me that, oh my gosh, I love these people and they love me and they're all white.
Yeah.
And it was new for me because I guess before then, what you learn in a space that's segregated is to not trust the other side.
Yes.
And so, but I was like, Rob Douglas, my advisor, still to this day at Ashland Theological Seminary, one of the kindest men of God I have ever met, with great integrity, loving his wife and children, loving his community, and just being a man of integrity in his job. Or my friend Martha Smith, who was a generation ahead of me, but we were both in seminary together, and somehow we clicked. And I just adored her and knew that I was safe with her. Or I had two roommates named Meg, which I was like, okay, Lord, I got my Megs. And I just loved them and they loved me, and I was safe with them and they were safe with me. And so it was the first time I realized, oh, I can exhale here. I can love these people and them love me. And so my seminary environment was a very white expression of church.
Yeah.
And I didn't remember it, but my advisor and friend, Rob Douglas, when he introduced me at a later graduation that I'd come back to sing for, he said, Janice told me, I said something about we were doing gospel, and she was like, well, your idea of gospel is actually not my idea of gospel. And I was like, of course I said that because I always talk too much. But, I brought what was me, but for all intents and purposes, it's, chapel was chapel.
Right.
And so even when I moved to New York and EJ and I got married, he had gone to a church plant of Redeemer Presbyterian Church out in Queens. And that's where we went to church, this small, tight-knit community. It was diverse because New York City is. But the expression of music was very much white, like it was get your sheet music and wonderful, merciful Savior. And that was what it was. And so when we got here, we were open and we were truly intending to visit many churches. And we just went to Grace Chapel the first Sunday, and Steve was preaching, and we were like, well, we got to come back and hear the second round of this sermon, the second part of the series. We came back, and we were like, well, we got to come back for the third. And then we just never left. So we just didn't visit anywhere else. It wasn't intentional. It was literally on the list of churches to visit. It was the closest to our townhouse in Franklin.
Wow.
And so we went
But
there
it
first.
ended up being like just about
Home.
everything else.
Yeah.
It ended up being the place that God actually had you in your season.
Yes.
To learn and to grow and
Yes.
to then push you off into the next. That's what I always find.
It's absolutely that.
It's if you look at life like that, instead
Yeah.
of being like, I don't know, I feel like I wasted this or I did this or I did this. It's like, no, nothing is
Wasted.
everything's a season.
Everything.
And I mean, even my time at Gateway,
Yeah.
I look back at that. I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah.
When I was there, I thought I'd be there for the next 20, 30 years.
Exactly.
So you can't not be grateful
Super
for
grateful.
the seasons or the places that you find yourself in.
Yes.
That you're like, oh, God's doing something here. I'm not going to miss it.
Yeah. And I mean, and he was, and he did. And like I said, it was beautiful. We loved and we were loved. Both of my children I had in that place, and my children were like, you know what I'm saying?
And you were kind of involved. You started there. You got involved in the worship team.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
were singing on the worship team.
Absolutely.
So you come to Nashville, get involved in there. And is that where you're like, when did he end up getting a job with Motown?
Well, so we get there, and it was July, and the Lord worked it out so that Women of Faith was holding auditions that September.
Okay.
And we went to church with Chance Scoggins, who was like, you should audition. And I mean, I walked in that audition. I told you I was a Liner's Notes kid. And so I walked in and I saw everybody who I had read on the liner notes all these years. And I called EJ and I said, I'm about to leave. Like, Jovan Woods is here, and Gerard, not Gerard because it's Women of Faith, but Jovan Woods is here. Like, I see like Ashley Gilbert. Like, I see literally everybody.
How sweet though, that
everybody
you would know.
I was like,
most people don't give.
I was like, she sings background for CeCe Winans.
gosh.
She sings background for Kirk Franklin. She does this and she does this. I'm out of here. I am so out of here.
I love
EJ was
that,
like,
though.
well, I mean, you showed up. You might as well just like
Just do
sing.
it.
I was terrified. Like, I'm not the auditioning type, right? I mean, shaking in my boots. And at the end of it, Rita.
Oh.
So we get to the end of this audition, and Chance is leading it because he produced the records. And he said, it's not like a sing-off or anything, but the only two people that I still have a question about are Janice and another young woman who's auditioning, like, about what's different about what you guys bring. And I was like, it's absolutely a sing-off. And he's like, so if you guys could come back up and sing one more song, Rita.
Oof.
Petrified, like almost in the
What did
literal
you
sense
do? You
of the
remember
word.
what you sang when you auditioned?
Absolutely,
What'd you-
because that morning when I was warming up, I'm a hymns girl, so I was singing. Which one is it? Not In the Garden. It wasn't In the Garden. It's there is a fountain filled with blood drawn from Emmanuel's veins.
God.
And so I was like, well,
What are you gonna sing?
he was like, what are you going to
Sing
sing?
off.
And I was like, I'll just sing the song the Lord put on my heart this morning. And I sang the hymn, and it moved the room. And after that, it was like, I got the job and I couldn't believe it, because I thought a hymn about like, lose all the guilty stains in the fountain of blood. Like, it's not a go easy on them hymn. It's like, dip yourself in the blood of Christ and be made better. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what I get up.
It's the same thing that happened in the Bronx with the kids.
It is.
Friday.
Singing
Yeah.
him.
Oh,
And
I
so
love it.
it was crazy. And so I got that job, and it didn't start until the next year, but we started rehearsing and preparing. And so
Wow.
technically I got the job in Nashville pretty quickly. And through that was singing background for Mandisa after that. And then I just broke out on my own, like, I'm just going to make music. And then it got to Motown, started working with this producer, LaShawn Daniels, Big Shiz, and signed us together to make the album. And after it was through those conversations that then Bill Hearn called EJ like, hey, consider coming here. And we knew at that moment, so this is the hairy part. We knew if EJ works here, I can't be an artist here. Because that's the conflict of interest, right? It's like,
well, I never really thought about that.
You can't be the head of a label and the artist be on it unless you're Mariah Carey and Tommy Mottola. But even then, I feel like she was signed first. So, yeah, there would always be the question of, is he giving her more? And you would never be able to outrun that. And it's, it's quite legally, a conflict of interest. So we had a choice to make, and I was pregnant with Gabriel. And it was like, do I fight for a second album here, or do you become the head of this label? And talk about being a woman and a mom.
Yeah.
It was hairy. And EJ's like, I'm not touching it. This is not my decision. Like, we can have conversation. Obviously, I will be on this side as a sounding board, and I will communicate back to you. But he's always been a smart man, but he knew, like, it can't be me saying, like, I need you to. And I realized, being pregnant, I was like, well, what I know about the industry is he will make more money attached to a label than I ever will. And we've got a child coming. Mm-hmm. And this is the right thing for our family, for me to become an independent artist and for EJ to move into
right.
the
and
industry.
This is where, like, we had started this conversation. This conversation started wrapped around being a woman in the industry, a Black woman now in the industry. Yes. The difference between women in artistry, or women singers and women artists, as opposed to male artists, there is a massive difference. I don't know that will ever change.
No.
It is a man's world, especially in the Christian field.
Yes.
And there is this fight and struggle that every woman artist, I think, finds herself in, where if you want to have the child and you want to have the husband and you want to do those things, then there's going to be a suffrage on this other. And you almost have to make this choice between family and career, which I've lived a different life.
Yeah.
It wasn't the life I thought I'd live.
Yeah.
But I was faced with that. But then I'm a single woman adopting a child. And now I've got the baby strapped to me while I'm leading worship.
Yeah.
And realizing you can actually do this.
Yes. And I took Gabriel everywhere.
Yeah.
When I had Benjamin is when I realized you can take one and you can't take two. Who knew? Like, I don't have the capacity to meet both. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it was.
And it's a different day from your mom.
Yes.
With you and John playing checkers in the back of a smoky-filled club.
Or putting out a cup and dancing.
Those days are long gone, Janice.
So inappropriate. It was still inappropriate in the 80s, you know what I mean? But for a decade to have that commercial, it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
Yeah, exactly.
It's right on the money. You know what I mean? Like, that's the vibe. But yeah, today you can't do that. And yeah, so with Gabriel, I did more. And when Benjamin came along, now it's also convoluted because Benji was born December 2019. So then 2020 was wildly at home. And so that is we just had to live a different life when he was really little.
Yeah.
And then as things ramp up, it's like by the time things have ramped back up, now he fully has a life at home, and bringing him out onto the road is actually disrupting that. So we figure out how to care for them best while we do our jobs. And, our parents are very helpful in that, especially my mother-in-law in this season. She comes once a month for a week at a time, and it's usually when I have to work.
Wow.
Or sometimes she's come twice a month. My mom has come. And so I find that it requires another motherly, nurturing presence when I'm out of the picture.
Yeah.
You know, like my friend Adrian will say, the kids will ask me, Mommy, can I have like that last bite of my food? And I'm like, okay. They ask EJ, can I have that last bite? He's like, this is mine. My friend Adrian will say, you could tell who had the C-sections. And it's like, that's right. It was me.
Oh my
so when I
gosh.
leave, you know, especially because EJ is such a great dad and he's really present. And especially in these, I will say, in the last year and a half, I've had some health issues that really made me fatigued. And I watched EJ step up in ways that are like, the Lord bless you for how you have blessed this family. But the kids, they don't miss me as much when like one of their grandmothers is there, because the nurturing presence is just a nurturing presence.
Yeah.
So it's the way things get done for me at this point.
Hey, everybody, I want to take a minute to talk to those of you and encourage those of you who maybe you're planting a church, you're on staff at a church, you're in the children's department of a church, and you run and oversee the curriculum at your kids' division of church. There is some friends of mine that have developed this curriculum that I just think it's the best curriculum for kids' church out there. It's called Amazing Kids. It is a Bible-based, spirit-filled curriculum. I know these guys, they are incredible creatives. Connie and Tyler Bates are the genius behind this, and they just love serving kids and serving God in serving our kids. If this is something that your church is looking for, if it's something that you as a pastor of your children's department is looking for, an enriched Bible-based curriculum to bring to your children's department of your church or your church plant, this is something that I would highly recommend that you do. I fully believe and back what these guys do. My own kid was under it for years, and it's just the way that they're doing it right now is just beautiful. So you can find all that information if you go to amazing.kids, and there's a kind of a special discount code that you can get, or a promotional code that you can get if you type in Rita in the promotional area of that, and they'll give you special pricing on that. But it's something that I just highly recommend. And kids are so important. They're so important in our churches. What we do when we drop our kids off in church and what's happening in the Sunday school area is so important for your children. And this curriculum is one of the best, and you will love it for your church. So check that out. It's incredible, and I back it 100%. But you've kind of entered into this musical phase now. You've released a single to an EP that you're about to launch in January.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's sit there for a second and talk about the expectation and the fear.
Yes.
Because I'm telling you, I don't care who I talk to. It's the same disease.
Yeah, it is.
Everybody walks in. It's this thing that it's another baby having a dream or desire. It's like having this baby. Birthing an album is like having a baby, and you want everything good for that.
Yes,
because it's part of your heart. It's part of your character. It's part of your blood, sweat, and tears.
Yes.
It's what your belief is.
Yes.
Your every melody line is searing through your veins.
Yes.
If you're doing it the same way I'm doing it, which for the most part, most of us, especially women, we feel what we're putting out more than many.
Yes.
But the expectation, and then the failure of it, and then the what ifs and the da-da-da, like it's just a lot. How do you go about doing that? I mean, you have all of these. I look at you and I'm like, man, the way the Lord sets you up to be padded with all of these beautiful different attributes that you have.
Thank
you know, if I had half of what you have, I'm sitting here listening to you thinking, I would have gone back to fishing. Like I would have become so disappointed in the music so many years ago that if I had an MDiv, if I had a psychology degree, if I had a nursing degree, if I had all those other
Anything
things I
else,
thought
yeah.
about, I would have been like, we're going back to fishing
Well,
because I can't do this anymore.
And there have been times when I have emotionally done that.
Yeah.
And EJ will call me on it, like, hey, things got hard here, and you exited and you tried to do something else. He's like, I think you either have to decide like what you're gonna do and stick with it, or exit. He's like, but I don't think you want to get 10, 15 years down the road and have exited.
Okay, so how do you, because man, this biz, I'm
Yes.
always looking for the exit sign to run out of the theater. Like,
I'm telling you.
It takes the Lord being like, no, no, no. And it's like, oh, because part of this too is you're handing this off, not just to an industry, which is hard in of itself. We talked a little bit about just the radio cycle of stuff.
Oh yeah.
But this is ultimately the Lord's.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, dude, can you like give this a push? Like,
yes.
because you're really wanting the Lord to bless this.
Yeah.
So how, as a Black woman in the industry, and I don't want to make it about race, but I want to make it about what it's harder. It's harder to there's stuff there that, I mean, for me in my age bracket, you can talk about an older white woman in worship before the whiteness of worship. You know what I'm talking about?
I do.
Back in the vineyard, Maranatha, like I was on the cutting edge of coming into it when worship was changing.
Yes.
The gospel world's
and
always
your sound
been there,
was changing it.
But the sound was different. So I was pioneering something that was never pioneered before as a white woman in this industry.
Well, and to that, let me honor you, because so when I say, like, when I was in seminary, one of the Megs, the Meg that I call Rumi, because I lived with her a couple of years, she would play your music, and I would be like, now what's that? That's different from what I'm hearing the rest of the white people that I'm hearing. And I would be drawn to it. And so you did change it. You did not just change it, but you brought people in, you know what I mean? Because it was like, that sound I can get with. That there's something about that's relatable, the way that you were singing and with everything and not with abandon and not holding back and controlling different places. It was like, I'm singing full out, because that's what gospel is, which is why it was familiar to me. Like, she sings in a way that I understand. So even that is a part of my story. Like, oh, if she can do that in this place, maybe the way that my heart wants to sing has a place to go. And so then it unlocks a place. Like, there's no me being able to sing at Women of Faith without having heard Rita Springer first. Does that make sense? Because I would assume you don't want what I have, but it's like, actually there is commonality. And so anyway, all that to say, I think what the Lord does that all over the place. And what I have learned over the years is that there are real barriers when it comes to race. There are real barriers when it comes to gender. There are real barriers when it comes to age. And the Lord can break them all down when it comes time. And so even when I can see, that's weird. Like, it doesn't look like Black people are invited there, or it doesn't look like women are allowed to do this there. I have found that as the Lord is working, I've not missed out on anything he had for me because someone gate kept me out of it. If that makes sense. Whatever they thought they were keeping me out of, the Lord opened the door to where I needed to be. So it really ends up being an exercise in acknowledging what's happening for the sake of being honest emotionally, because it hurts your feelings. And if I don't acknowledge that it's hurt my feelings, it turns into bitterness somewhere, and it comes out sideways as cynicism. So acknowledging real barriers and how they hurt my feelings, and taking that in prayer to the Lord, and then reminding myself of the gospel and the fact that I won't lack anything because my Father is in control of this all, right? It's kind of like the same way the Lord did home ownership with me and EJ and John and people that I know, where in this country, home ownership was kind of held back from Black people because it's a way to build wealth, right? So when you think of certain neighborhoods and they're considered bad neighborhoods or whatever, the history of that is that they were redlined, and that banks literally drew a red line around certain neighborhoods to make those, so saying we're not loaning for those neighborhoods. And so then property values go down, people lose wealth, and it becomes what people consider the ghetto, right? Even though I know that that's not the original use of the word ghetto, but either way, so that becomes a neighborhood. Well, fast forward 70 years, and then somebody says, that house has good bones, and all of a sudden it's gentrified. And now the money is poured back in, and the people who have had to live there for decades are then, squeezed out because they can no longer afford property taxes and to stay there if they're renting. So with that, I think to myself, Lord, it's not fair that in the Black community, we've not had a chance to build wealth through home ownership, like literally kept out of suburbs, literally red lines around neighborhoods that became ours. And at the same time, while that is true, the Lord has allowed me to be a homeowner. Right. And the Lord has allowed that to work in favor for my children. And yes, it doesn't make up for, decades of people in the community, of people who look like me, not being able to do that. But I've seen God be too good to too many people to just tell this side of the story. Yeah. So that's how I think of it with music too. Yeah. It's like, there may be real barriers that I must acknowledge for the sake of my being honest, heart-wise. And then I look to God and I take that to him like, are you going to let them do this to me?
Right.
I'm doing this because you asked me to. Right. I could be sitting somewhere minding my own business, doing my own thing, but I want to lead the life that you have planned.
Right.
And so I'm assuming that the way you have made has been made, and that it'll open up before me, and that nobody can shut that down regardless. So I have to hold both.
Right.
In order to stay encouraged, in order to keep believing. And sometimes the distance between those conversations are longer than others, where it's like, well, today I'm just mad.
But I think that's such a great point, because you can kind of see that in just about everything in your life. I mean, I remember recently I was having a conversation with the Lord about just people that you're trying to reconcile with because something happened or something, and man, the Lord came down on him and he's like, have you ever considered that the people that are not in your life are not supposed to be in your life right now? So why are you trying so hard?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, because I'm trying to do what I feel like is supposed to be. And he's like, yeah, but you're not asking me why they're not in your life.
That's right. That's right.
And it was like, instead of doing what the manuscript or what it always just feels like you're supposed to do, because that's what you're supposed to. It's supposed to really ask the Lord into that conversation to say, okay, if there's a different route here, and I'm supposed to take that different route see it a different way, then will you just clue me in on what I'm... And when you involve the Lord into that process, what historically may be factual may not be what the Lord is trying to actually say to you in this moment.
And I'll tell you, I have never... I can't look back and despise any moment of pain that's led me into deeper conversation with the Lord. That time has never been wasted and has never not produced fruit that is quite valuable to me.
Yeah.
And so I just try to remind myself of that when I get anxious and I think, is this going to work? Is there a space? You know, all the things that people ask, is there a space for me? Does anybody even still care?
Which is the personal
Yes.
conversation you're swirling around your head when your baby, your project, your desire,
Yes.
your dream is just about to be placed on the table.
That's right.
And these are normal things that just go through your head.
Of course. And then I am the type I have a personality where sometimes I've tried to take that exit with my children, which obviously then makes them an idol, right? Where it's like, the Lord is like, I'm asking you to come over here. Your kids are fine. Stop trying. Don't let them be an excuse to bury your talents in the ground and then say I'm harsh. Like don't do that. So don't exit with your children either, right?
Yeah.
Because that's my personality. Well, I tell you what, I'll just be mom of the year.
Yeah.
And it's like, actually, no, you won't. Because you need to go to counseling for this, this, and that.
You're going to be therapy.
Yes, EJ and I are always like, listen, they're going to go to counseling. They're going to talk about it. So prepare yourself.
Oh, yeah, they are.
They are. Oh, well. And we do our best, and we'll, depending on the Lord, and then we'll give them the freedom to say what you want to say. We'll listen.
But you have to find the balance in, especially when it has to do with the threading of your own dreams. Like these are dreams that God was first involved in because he's the one that gave you the ability to walk out the dream.
Exactly.
And I'm such a big dreamer, but I'm also such a big dream spinner. Like on people, it's like, I mean, my heart is to encourage people and to be like, you can fly, just jump off the nest and fly, you know? And I believe in that. I believe that until you actually get up there, see how scary it is from that viewpoint, but realize I wouldn't be up here if I didn't have wings to do this.
That's right.
And that's the beautiful thing about the Lord is that if he's given you, his origin is the gift came from him. Yes. And if you're going to avoid the gift your whole life, even when he keeps pricking you with, remember that, then you have to actually risk the gift, but find balance in, okay, here we are. Yeah. We're going to do this. How do you then, because this is another big thing, and I feel like I'm here even with the releasing of Fed by Ravens, doing that in a way that I've never done it before. I don't have a label this time. Doing it, again, pioneering. It's like, pioneers died on the Oregon Trail. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? They all died of some horrifying disease.
Dysentery is what it was.
It's like
the wagon wheel broke and now you're stuck.
So I think that I struggle with that because I'm like, I'm a pioneer. I might never make it to Oregon. I might die of dysentery. But it's like, but I'll be written about in the history books, you know. As I was digging the ditches, I was in the wagon.
That's right.
And there's a bummer about that because pioneers sometimes are not called to actually build the town. That's right. They're called to get us to the town, get us to the property to build the town. So how do you find the balance? Because I'm learning how to find the balance in, here we are, pioneering. Yeah. And then also turning to the Lord and saying, what rights do I have to ask of you? Mm-hmm. You know, that was the big thing for me with Fed by Ravens is, do I have rights in this one? He's like, yeah, you have rights. Okay, what are my rights? Yeah. Well, what do you want? Yeah. That's a hard one when he asked that. I don't want you to forget this record. Yeah. I don't want you to forget it. Yeah. You know, that was my thing. It was like, don't you forget this record. Don't you let all the hard work. And he's like, well, what's forgetting? What does forgetting look like to you? Lord, and it was like having these deep conversations about, and I think this is like the gathering of so many people's dreams. Mm-hmm. When you see a dream and then you see it fail, you see a dream and it doesn't achieve, you see a dream. Yeah. And so getting out of bed and then respinning the dream and remaking the blank, when it's like, is it just going to be thrown in the mud? Is it going to be worth it? This is the risk, right? This is the risk. Especially for those of us that have a harder time. Yeah. Maybe based on gender, based on color, based on whatever it is. Yeah. Finding the balance in, don't you forget, and realizing I've got rights to this. Like, so what are your rights? Oh man, I'm so glad you asked that because I think what you just described literally is my process where the Lord whittles down, what do you want?
and and then makes me define the terms that I've just requested.
Yep.
Right. And then, because in that place, there's usually some form of healing that I need. And it's like, I want this.
Yes.
Right. And so the more I have that conversation with him, the more he heals, around and within a wound.
Yeah.
And then it becomes more and more refined. And so I spent time in 2021 and 2022, and part of 2023 working at Porter's Call, right? The nonprofit that counsels porters, other people might know it as counseling, other recording artists. And I learned so much there about actually what I want, because what I began to realize after conversation and peering in and listening and letting the Lord lead me in leading others through conversation was, it doesn't matter whether or not someone has become successful with music or not.
Yeah.
I think everybody at a certain point realizes that what we have all been chasing is a mirage, right?
Yeah.
You get to it and you stand in it and it disappears because it's not real. You approach and you never reach it because it's not a real location. And so because of that, the Lord really gave me a picture of like, let's figure out what it is you actually want to be doing and how you want it to affect people and where you want it to land and what kind of time and what kind of situations do you want to engage that work in. And it really made me focus on what job do I actually want to do? Because there are tons of jobs within being an artist even, right? It's like, what job do I want to be doing? What job do I want my kids to see me doing as I'm doing ministry? Because they know that the jobs we have committed our lives to are so that people might come to know and get closer to Jesus. Like they know that. So every time away from them, they're understanding that's this. And so I think the process is me learning to be honest in conversation with the Lord, with where my heart is at the time.
Yeah.
This is what I want now. Like you said, I don't want this to be forgotten. I think one of my last ones was, I don't want this to just take from my family. Like I can't be in that anymore. Like independent artistry is expensive, time-wise, monetarily, attention-wise. Independent artistry is expensive, energy-wise. And so I was like, Lord, I don't want this to just take from my family financially or energy or attention or time. Can you let it pour back into my family in all those ways? Because we've been doing this for a good 7 years now, and the checkbook has not balanced. Now, he's provided in other ways, just not through music. But what I learned about myself is I was like, Lord, I'm going to be honest. Thank you, Lord, for the provision through EJ's work and through all the things you've done, even through things that I've done outside of actual artistry, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's speaking or preaching but it's like, Lord, if you want me to sing, I like the feeling of earning money. I like the feeling of watching the checkbook balance. If you tell me I can't have that, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But if you ask me what I want the checkbook to balance, because I don't want it to drain my family financially, where I pay for music, I pay to go here, I pay to do this, and it not come back in.
Yeah.
If I may. And then we wait and we see. And I don't know, I'm depending on the word when it tells me that if I hope in him, I won't be disappointed.
Yeah.
So if at some point I feel disappointment, then I'll go to him and say that. Then we'll have that conversation. Yeah. But I've learned it is an ongoing conversation of honesty. What do I want? Why do I want it? Will you give it to me? If not, why not? Can we talk about that? And just letting him be master and letting him be the safe place where I can actually communicate those
And that's
things.
the balance.
That's the balance.
That's the balance.
Because I have learned that I don't tip the scales in my favor to quit. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's unless he tells me, set it down. It's not like, well, if it's not going to produce what I wanted to produce, I'm out of here, Lord. It's like that doesn't tip the scales in my favor.
And I think it's, you and I have seen enough, and especially with EJ being in the inner structure of the business, we've seen enough, known enough, we know enough people. We've seen the destruction.
Yes.
That power, greed, money, all those things. I think for people that don't, or that just are assuming that the Christian industry is just this
pure.
Oh God, just the Lord must just be, his anointing just must be falling and oozing off the walls. Like that's really not the case.
No, it's the business of selling product to people who say they believe in Jesus.
That's right.
It's quite literally
and the difference is the beauty of and the kindness. The kindness of the Lord is that there are many of us that have been given a gift or given a calling from the Lord who actually really just want the Lord to grab his chest and be pleased with what we offer.
That's right.
And it doesn't mean that he's asking us to do that for free.
Right. No.
But he is asking us to do that with his voice.
Yes.
And so I think it's really great to actually talk about the balance of that it's okay to say, because I'm in that, I've always been in that struggle of I actually hate making money off the church. Like it's very, honorariums are very tough for me for a church to pay. It feels sticky. It feels weird. But I've always thought, man, it would be really, really great to see royalties or to see, the business side of the publishing. I've never seen that.
Right.
And whenever I came close to it, the Lord's like, he's made sure that it's, and I don't want to say that's totally the Lord. I think some of that is man's greed. And I think some of that is contractual stuff that probably isn't always great.
That's right.
But the Lord's allowed it.
Yeah.
And my grievance has never been with the industry. My grievance has usually bottom line been with what the Lord has allowed.
That's right. Same. Which it also speaks to the race thing. Because at the end of the day, I think around 2020, when I was really peering in about how I felt about it, it was like, well, you know what, Lord, I think I'm mad at you. Because they wouldn't be able to do it if you didn't let them.
If you didn't let them.
And this is the era that you've allowed me to live in. There have been worse, so I don't want to act like this is the worst era to live in. But when I say era, I mean the era of race being, even though a construct, affecting life, right? Because
kind of in all aspects.
Exactly. And so it's kind of like, I mean, it wasn't about, in certain time periods, it was less about race and more about other things. You know what I'm saying? So race is the way we see it right now. It's fairly contemporary if you pan out and look at all of time. So it's like, God, you allowed me to live as a Black woman in a time when that may not be beneficial at all times. And so what did you have in mind?
Right.
Kind of thing. Like, so it really comes down to him.
Yeah.
And I feel like he's the one who owes me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do, what I love and what I appreciate and what I deeply respect about the Lord is that he's more than willing to have the conversation if we are more than willing to listen.
That's right.
And ask the questions. Because there's never a question that I have that he won't
address.
He won't address. But am I willing to hear all of the things that he... That's because we know the language of Jesus, especially the red letters. It's like, when he's asked a question, he'll answer with an answer that sounds more like a question.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? To actually get to really what you're asking about.
Exactly.
And he's beautiful in that way.
Yes.
But it's been an interesting journey for me to balance that with what I do in music, what I do in, because we can, I need to have you come back and I would love to even have a whole conversation about the whole racial thing, because that opening up that outside of the industry of what we're talking is like, that's like a,
I mean,
there's stuff there.
It's stuff there. I think
like church and race and all of those kinds of things, I think is it's a big question.
It is. It is a big question. And I think one of the hardest things for me as a believer who is in skin that is Black with an experience to go with it, in a body that is a woman with the experience to go with it, is that I am made aware of life, society, culture has made me aware of what is my preference versus what is the norm, and ultimately there's not much norm. But what's hard about it in churches is that oftentimes I don't feel like when I go into churches, even the ones that are more diverse, I don't feel like people who have never lived on the margins understand that their preferences are just theirs. So in Nashville, unless you go to a Black church, you're pretty much going to hear CCM, right?
Oh, yeah.
Unless you go to a church full of people on the margins and they have a sound, you're going to hear CCM. But I don't think most diverse and white churches understand that that's just a white preference. Wow. In the sense that that's not the baseline of Christian music for much of the world.
Right.
It's just someone's preference, or how a song is mixed in the house is based on preference. You listen to gospel music and what is prominent are the voices, right?
Yeah.
You're going to hear every harmony. You're going to hear a soloist, and you're going to hear, even if it's 3 background singers, you're going to hear them well enough to hear everything that they're doing. And the guitar is a little buried. You listen to CCM, the guitar is brought up front to where the voices are, apart from the lead vocal. And it's like, people don't even realize that's not how you mix the house in church. That's just your preference. And so that is one of the hardest things. And ultimately, even the hardships about being Black, what I appreciate about my experience as a Black woman is that it's not hard for me to see that. To me, it's harder to live life for Jesus, not being aware of where my privileges are. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because I'm a Black woman, I realize that, education affords me things that a lack of education is held back from people, right? People are held back when they don't have an education. And I can see how differently I'm treated based on an education, or based on having lighter brown skin sometimes than darker brown skin. Somebody is definitely more willing to put me on a picture with a group of white people oftentimes, or a white makeup artist tends to know how to make my face up more so than my younger sisters who are browner than me, 2 of them, because, my skin tone there are different things that you have to do, like the darker one's complexion. You have to consider oil on set, right? And a lot of times people just don't know how to do hair of people. I mean, the times I've had to advocate for myself on set to be like, I literally had to tell somebody, and I don't think nobody wants to hear it, but it's like, hey, I looked at the makeup artist online that you want to use. I saw the Black people she made up, and I don't want to look like that. Can we get somebody else? Because that's not how I want to be represented. But that is a lot to have to say, and you have to bring a certain value for people to even hear that when I shouldn't have to advocate for that for myself. And so, yeah, it gets tough in the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
And that's when I have to have those conversations, because sometimes I'm more tired than others.
Right.
And I have to say, Lord, today this is exhausting. Being a Black woman is exhausting today.
Yeah.
And I'm irritated that you would let it be like this. So what can you tell me at this time? And usually what he tells me is, I'm sorry that's tough. Yeah. That's really tough. And if you can see it in somebody else, there's a place in you that you haven't seen it yet. So where's that place? Because it's like, right. If I've been alienated based on a blind spot of someone else's, for sure, there's a blind spot that I have where I've alienated somewhere else. And so the Lord reminds me that this thing is cyclical. Like, nobody misses being implicated in this, because you're all human. So I will console you and love on you through this, but just know this is what humanity creates. This is the stench in the land, and you're not the only one that just doesn't have a stench, sweetheart. So, and so it literally goes round and round like that, being honest, like, today, this is exhausting, Lord. And him hearing that and loving on me and making a way where there was no way. And also reminding me that, hey, this is a human issue. This is, you all call it a race issue in this era, but this is a human issue. Yeah. And where are you doing that same thing?
Right.
Where I can show you, open your eyes to this moment right here kind of thing. But yeah, it gets
and it's
real.
I think what's so hard too about that is that while that's a personal encounter that you have to want to have.
Yes.
You have to want to talk to the Lord about that.
Yes.
You have to want to sit down and say, hey, instead of brooding about this, instead of being angry about this.
Well, I do get angry sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, you could choose to go on Instagram. You could choose to shout that to this. You could, but to pull back and be like, okay, Lord, can I just ask you about this to give me your perspective? Because what I'm seeing a lot of, even on both sides, I think, is with everything, whether it's political, whether it's,
socially
social, whatever. It's that when we're not having, as Christians, as faith-filled people, when we're not actually involving the Lord in the conversation, or we're not getting the full picture of how to grab our humanity, find our faith, find our grace, find our mercy, find our love, and respond. And we end up trading a lot of that for worry and fear and anger and resentment and bitterness and all those things. And it's
I've
hard.
done that too.
It's I mean, because I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm like, but that is a strong place to have to be when not many people are having that conversation with the Lord.
It is,
and you know what I'm saying? It's like,
I assume though, that I don't know where, I assume that everybody will be having that conversation with the Lord. Some of them are more drawn out than others.
Yeah.
And so maybe somebody's in the midst, I have to say, maybe somebody's in the midst of that conversation and they just haven't gotten to the healing point that would have made me most comfortable right now. Because I've been in that place where it's like, it gets under your skin too deeply before you manage it.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, now I gotta work backwards. And I've got to like forgive, so I can come to a reasonable conversation again. Like, you know what I mean? Like it does get that hairy sometimes, and oftentimes it depends on how quickly things pile up. Like, there were weird things happening last year, and it would always be while I was driving. And it would be like, there's no way, oftentimes with race too, there's no way to prove that it's race. And what you end up doing is, you'll understand this as a woman, when you've been pushed into the margins in a portion of your life, you start to read the language of the ones with power, and you start to read the language and the behavior so that you can be safe. So then you start to see things before they're blatantly visible to anybody who would be outside of the margins. And you wouldn't be able to prove, like, he didn't like that I'm a woman and did that. But you feel it and you're like, oh, because I felt it before. And it's not when people say the race card or the gender card, it's like, it's not a fun card to play. It's a survival card. Yeah. And so the thing about it is you can never prove that something was a race thing to anyone outside of how it feels to be in that group. But you start to recognize it. And there were little things that I would be like, oh my gosh, like that just happened. Lord, that's traumatizing. And those kinds of things add up. And then you have to flush them out because they just don't, like I said, you don't tip the scales in your favor by letting them pile up into anger and bitterness either. And I feel like I've learned that is the conversation that I'm having with the Lord is not out of nobility. It's out of, oh, right, that way doesn't work. It's better if I just, like Habakkuk, take this conversation to the Lord and say, really, your answer is that it gets worse before it gets better, right. And let him tell me that the righteous shall live by faith and remind me of the gospel and what it means and what it affords me and how that is better than anything I can see in the natural,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if I am trying to educate myself constantly as a white woman, it's because I'm raising a black man.
Yes.
And there are so many things I just don't understand.
Because how could you, apart from...
I can't. I just can't. And I find myself in such an apologetic place with justice because I'm always like, even with music, it's like he's seen people come and go in this household. And he's seen the gospel movement. He's seen the contemporary Christian movement. Yeah. And we were just having this conversation even about music and him saying the difference between Lily White gospel, like Lily White CCM compared to, because we were talking about music of influence. Yeah. And, he's like, well, I gravitate toward listening to rap and not even Christian rap because I'm looking for authenticity. Yes. And I'm like, I know you are. And he's like, because if I compared it to this over there, it sounds like you want to say the truth, but you're not really saying the truth. That's right. And so there's all of these different conversations, and we've had them all from being called whitewashed in college, because he doesn't fit in, because he's been raised by a white woman. So he doesn't act fully black. Right. But to the black kids, he's not, he's not fully black because he's been raised by, the white kids, he's not really white because he's been raised by, because he's black. Yeah. And so it's these things where I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't have the language. And we were even talking about the slave movement and having the book of Exodus being cut out of the Bible when they gave the slaves the Bible. And automatically, when we were talking about that, I mean, he turned around to me and he said, so they wouldn't understand the free. I'm like, I'm like, have you ever heard that before? And he's like, no, I've never heard that before. Yeah. But it was one of these things where it's just this apologetic, like, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm apologizing for more because I don't understand the history of it. I've never had to understand the history of it. I've never had to, as a white person, my privilege has always been that I didn't have to understand that. Can I apply that to being a woman in the industry? Oh, there's a lot of different things you could say. I feel like this. Yeah. Have I been dismissed by a pastor because I'm a woman? Yeah. Absolutely. Have I been more feasible because I sit behind a piano? Because if I didn't, I had a pastor tell me once, I'm okay with you on that stage. If you stay seated. Because if you stay seated behind that piano, I'm not okay with you if you stand up and stand behind a mic. Just things. Do I understand that? Yeah. Wow. But is there a is there an element of being the same kind of thing? Yes, but
Still different.
still different.
Still different. And I think that's okay. I think there are experiences I won't ever understand. And I think my position has to be surrendered to the Lord and open to what he wants to show me, tell me, educate me about as he leads me in community. So you say, like, I'm learning all these things because I'm raising a Black son. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think what I always hear as it concerns you in justice is that you're having conversations.
Yeah.
I think, but I mean, like, you say, oh yeah, like that's a given. I don't think that's a given for everyone. There were kids who lost their parents in 2020 because the parents didn't want to have conversations. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I say that to say, I'm not sure. I think learning to be aware of where I might be on the margins and where I'm absolutely in the center or closer to it has been super helpful for me in allowing the Lord to check me, you know what I mean? As opposed to, based on who I'm with, as opposed to learning a lot about different people. And I think if we were committed to being, to letting the Lord be our master, that would actually fix the things that we're talking about. Because then we would be able to find where we really are on the spectrum and allow the Lord to speak to that. Because that's not hard for him. It's really just being accountable for ourselves and awakening to an idea that, oh, society, no matter where, no matter when, society does a thing. You know what I mean? Like, it creates a culture always. And there will be people on the top and there will be people on the bottom. No matter where, no matter what era, that is what's going to happen when you get a group of people together. They're going to find a way to scramble for power. Not even because everybody wants power, but because people don't want to be without power, right? And that's just humanly how we're going to respond. And it so happens that in our era, that has looked a certain way, right? But if you go to South Sudan, the power struggle has been between two tribes with similar skin tones. And so it for me, it becomes less about the actual physical demographics that we find ourselves in, and more about, oh, this has always been and will always be a power struggle, and people desperately trying to feel more empowered, or people desperately trying to hold on to power, because that's how humans respond.
Right.
So with that, and the conversation with the Lord becomes the important one, because if that is possible in somebody else, it's possible in me. And that's what I know I'm responsible for in the presence of the Lord. And the other things that happen have everything to do with, Lord, this hurts my feelings, either for me or for my kids, or I'm specifically trying to keep my kids safe. Lord, since you are the protector, can you come in and speak to this? Because this that I'm feeling about race right now has everything to do with my Black sons eventually becoming Black men out into this world, and letting the Lord speak to that, and less having less to do with the world out there, because I'm not sure the world out there is going to change in my lifetime or my kids. And think about what it would take if this is about power, and who's been empowered in our society and those who have not.
Yeah.
Look at how long it took to build that and how steeped we are in it.
Yeah.
What would it take to shift that?
Yeah.
Something dramatic.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I'll see that in my lifetime. Right. And so when I think of people who have who were enslaved in the past, and I see that God somehow was enough for them, that is what I'm attached to.
Isn't that amazing?
That is what I love about gospel music. That's it's like most people in the world, they hear gospel music and they feel it. Why? Because it's born out of pain and suffering.
Yeah.
And my only hope in having anything in this life is 100% attached to Jesus. And I think about, that was good enough. That sustained people who were enslaved.
Yeah.
That has to sustain me too, because there's something about the gospel that is that good.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't despise my experience, because I'm like, oh, that's easier for me to get to. I won't trade it. I won't go back. I won't go back. I won't go back.
Right.
Because with that, I can see, oh, it doesn't feel good to adopt the identity that the world is giving me. I actually want to adopt the one that the Lord has for me.
Yeah.
And even more readily, right? So in that sense, I end up feeling like on the margins, there's a proximity, a nearness to the Lord that I wouldn't trade.
Yeah, I'm always kind of struck by how much historical, supernatural, spiritual power music has had through the decades.
Yes.
You know, when you think about Amazing Grace, just the song Amazing Grace and the truth behind it. And the fact that you could sing that in a jail and you could sing that, you know, just about anywhere that God's never been walked, you know, his name's never been spoken, and it'll bring people to its knees because it holds a power unlike any other power, because it holds a historical truth to a cry that was valid.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying?
That's
it's
right.
just that's why I love when I talk about the creative arts, when I talk about God as creator. There's something that you can't dictate a landscape. You can't stand at the seashore and tell me there's no God.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? Or tell me that there's no. And I just am a believer. I don't know if I'll ever see it in my lifetime either.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope it for my kid.
Yeah.
More than I can possibly tell you. But there would have to be radical shifting and change.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, one can hope.
One can hope. And one should hope.
And
one
hope.
should press towards that hope, right? I mean, I am doing all I can to bring that about for our children, right? But at the same time, it's this weird clutching gas thing where I push for that, and then the motor in it that helps me push for it has to be rooted in, because this is what the kingdom of God looks like. Yeah. Because otherwise I leave people out of that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Otherwise I push for it in ways that make sense to people that look like me and leave out other people that I haven't considered. So I have to, in pushing for it, I have to ultimately push for it because that's the kingdom. Because that's the only way that's the only way I know everybody has been considered.
Well, we all have a part, right? We all have a part to play in this. And if I'm going to give a artistic illustration to it, based on what I do, like even why I did Fed by Ravens was because the Lord was like, not only do you need to find a way out of the wilderness, but you need to make a roadmap for other people to find a way out of a wilderness. So make a record. Yeah. And of course, I didn't want to at the time. I'm too old to do it. It's like all the excuses not to do it. But it's like my part in this season of my humanity, in what God's given me to do, was to artistically write a manual
Yeah.
that I didn't hear being sung in churches.
That's right.
They weren't singing. They weren't singing psalms in churches. I was reading psalms and
Yeah.
people were more honest with the Lord in the psalms, saying, I don't know where you are. Like,
That's
I don't know
right.
what you're doing. I wasn't hearing
Yeah.
the latest hot worship song saying, I don't know if you're real.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And the Lord's like, no, write that language, because that will help
That's
people
right.
actually get out of the wilderness.
Yes.
I think we're all in some sense trying to play our part.
Yes.
I think it's just how you attune yourself to the voice in the ear of the Lord to be like, are you willing to do this? Because it's going to be an uphill climb if you do.
Yeah.
And you might not like the results in the beginning, but this is what your life was meant to do. And I look at you and I'm like, man, you have all these avenues that are actually creating the process for you, not at just your own freedom,
Yeah.
but your voice of freedom for a generation and whoever you'll touch. You had the musical, influence in the beginning, but then you went down the road of this. You thought you were going to do that. And math played a part in it.
Yeah.
All
did.
these, the divinity played a part in
Yes.
it. All the stuff that led you has played a part to actually your vocalized process of this isn't right.
Yeah.
This isn't right.
That's right.
This needs to change. This needs to, and then even your musical influence of what you're about to release.
Yeah.
Like if we swing all the way back to what you're about to release musically, what's the name of the EP?
The name of the EP, we're still landing on it.
Okay.
But it has everything to do with a garden, right? It's why the artwork, even for the single, was, foliage and flowers coming out of the arrow, or the artwork has everything to do with things growing, because I think what I've learned is that I have seen my life in such a linear way. And I've learned that it's more like a garden, and that the Lord and I are working together to bring certain things to fruition, right? And I have had to learn my responsibility in tending the garden, what I can do, what I'm supposed to do, and then what I have to rely on the Lord to do. And so I think the theme of it really is this honest partnership that is just getting more and more honest, and getting more and more honest about the things that I need healing from at this point still.
And these are songs you're writing.
Yes. I wrote this one song called Who Could Love You More? And I realized, I have been someone who's dealt with anxiety over the years. And it really came about once I became a mom. It was like, oh, I love these people so much, and I can never unchoose them. And now I am just like hyper focused on them being well and okay.
Yeah.
And the Lord was like, come back. Like, you have no control over any of this. And loving me through that, but just getting to the nitty gritty of my own wounds and my own trauma. And this song, even especially after my time in Porter's Call, what I realized I often needed to hear, and many people I talked to needed to hear, was just about how much God actually loves us. Because I think if we actually caught on to that, there would be so many worries that melted away.
Yeah.
And so I sat down with Dewan Hill and Chrissy Nordoff, and I was like,
wow.
This song came out, Who Could Love You More? Like, you're safe, you're secure. Who could love you more? Like, God loves us so much. There are no worries. There are no worries if we consider that. And I remember being in the writing session and saying, Dewan and I should be able to sing this to our kids at night, and they understand all of the language.
Right.
Because ultimately, even once we grow up, that language we still need, that parental, simple, straightforward language of, I love you, I'm here for you, I care for you, I provide for you, I'll protect you, I will guide you, I am your parent. Like we're all still needing that, and so it's just been about, where are the places where we can be honest with the Lord and hear him back honestly and respond well and let things grow from that and flourish in places where we never expected, in places where we've hoped it would flourish, in places that have been dry. And so I think it's just it's an EP of real life and an honest conversation with God in different facets. One song is called I'm Covered. And I had gotten in a car accident the day we wrote that. A lady hit me. And I was so mad. Oh, I was so mad. Oh, Rita.
Were the kids in the car?
No. Which, thank the Lord. Because I ended up having to apologize to the woman. I said, I am so sorry for how I flew off the handle at you. Because fear brought about the anger, and that's at my kid's car seat. And what if my kid? And it's just like the Lord was like, you're accounting for things that weren't even a part of the situation. Wow. I need you to know that you're covered. I need you to know that I'm protecting you. I'm protecting your kids. They're not even in the car.
Right,
chill.
Right.
And so it's just about honest dialogue with the Lord. And that's the place where you don't actually have to worry. You're covered. Relax. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. And just the honest dialogue between me and the Lord in this season of me realizing that is forward movement, right? I think I've always thought that forward movement was getting to the place where I'm so good at that now, I don't have to talk to the Lord about it.
Yeah.
No, I think forward movement is more and more continuous conversation with the Lord.
Yeah.
And just, it's not about perfection.
Right.
It's about communion. It's about being. It's about authenticity in his presence. And so all of the tasks for me have been whittled down to the disciplines that we all know.
Yeah.
Stay in his presence, read his word, worship, pray, the disciplines of hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah.
It's the same today. And that's how the garden flourishes. That's how we heal. That's how we grow. That's how we flourish. That's how dry places become made new,
Yeah. That's actually amazing.
Thank you.
Now, do you have you don't have a release date yet?
EJ would say, don't say it because then you miss it.
The moment you say it, it's like, whoopsies.
So, but I'll say top of the year.
Hey, everybody, this is Rita Springer. Thank you so much for coming in and joining me on the podcast here with Worship is My Weapon. There's a lot of things I'm doing right now. And one of the things that we provide alongside this podcast is a newsletter that we send out to those of you that are subscribed, where I just answer questions and kind of give you information. And sometimes you guys are able to write in with questions that you just are curious about. We love that. We love that interaction. I actually love to interact with those of you that want something a little bit more beyond the podcast. So if that's you, make sure to get our newsletter, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the newsletter, and stay in touch with all the things that we're doing here on the podcast in that newsletter. Okay, as we wrap this up, let me ask you a couple questions.
Okay.
Now, you probably have heard me talk about this. Have you ever heard me talk about what do you burn for as opposed to what your gifts are? I don't think burning and gifting is the same thing.
No, I've learned that lesson. And I won't say the hard way, but yeah.
But the burning is almost like if the gift is your vehicle, the burning is the gasoline.
Yes.
So like my burning is courage. Mm-hmm. So I'm constantly just throwing courage. What do you feel like you burn for?
I burn to see people healed and made whole in the presence of God.
Physically, spiritually, the
whole gamut. And I didn't realize that that's what it was. I kept wondering, why does he keep popping me around jobs? Like, why am I a teacher here, and then I sing here, and then I teach or preach here, and then I write here, or then I work at Porter's Call.
Yeah.
And Porter's Call was when I realized, because in the room, you know, being an artist, you're engaging many people at a time, right?
Yes.
When I worked in a counseling center, I was one-on-one, which is a very weird feeling for an artist or an adjustment, because it was like, oh, I've been kind of conditioned to believe the more people, the more impact. And that's not actually the kingdom of God. So, I mean, the Lord chose 12 people and a world has been impacted, right? So the Lord is a little more grassroots than that. And so I would be one-on-one, and that's where I realized when the light bulb came on in that room of Porter's Call, it was the same feeling as standing and singing to a bunch of people. It's like when the Lord meets us in this room, it feels the same as the Holy Spirit meeting us in an auditorium or a theater or an arena. And I realized, oh, I just care about that moment. I care that people, even if it comes in the form of tears and finally hiking up that hill in that authentic moment of, Lord, I'm broken here and I need you. That is the moment that I burn for, where the people actually come into the presence of God and they let it all out. They let it all out, whether that's through a song or a sermon or a one-on-one conversation. That's what I burn for.
That's amazing.
Songs have been the vehicle, whatever.
Yeah.
That's what
and
I
you're
need.
not tied to, I have to, after this, I'll do another record, then I'll do, you're basically like, whatever the Lord wants, I'm doing it.
Whatever the Lord wants. I have come to grips with the fact that singing is the original vehicle that he used in my own heart and then outward. And so it holds a special place in my heart.
Right.
And so there will be some version of music and art always, but that doesn't mean, I've come to realize that doesn't mean I get to assume that it's for the industry.
Yeah. Now, what about your podcast? You and EJ were doing a podcast.
Yes,
we're
working on it. We are still doing it. We're working on the next season right now. And so we're excited to do it. We're excited to do it. We got to get it going.
I know, because you did it for a while, and then you kind of took a little hiatus.
We took a hiatus, and we were working out all the business behind it, and now we are coordinating our schedule so we can do it. I tell you,
it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
It's
a lot, as you know.
Yeah. And then what else is on the horizon outside of being a mom to the kids? You got anything else?
I do. The Lord has told me to write something, and so I am in a couple of weeks going to take, and because I have a kind, sweet husband who nudges me toward in the right direction. He was like, go away to pray. Like it's been a while since you got to focus on just hearing the voice of the Lord for more than a day at a time. But he's like, go away. Like the kids will be fine. Go to a beautiful place, stay there and just pray and hear and worship and write down what he tells you. So I know he wants me to write something. I'm not exactly sure what he's putting together yet. And I'm desperately trying not to manage it.
Yeah.
On this end.
Yeah.
You know, it's let it come out.
The other thing of being a woman is that. Yeah.
Yes.
Like, excuse me, pardon me, can I finish your sentence for you?
Yes. It's like, and when do we make things without also thinking of their uses? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like so it's like, don't think of that yet.
Well, for me too, I have to do everything else.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I almost have to stop sometimes with the Lord's like, so yeah, I get it.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for coming and talking to me. I want you to come back.
Sure.
And I just want to have like a big powwow about diversity.
Yeah.
I would love that.
Yeah. I'll say
all of the feels that comes with.
Feels. So many feels, Rita.
Oh
so
gosh.
many feels.
But I think I think I want to explore
Yeah.
the edges of it.
The edges.
Like, the edges
Yeah.
of it that the church just doesn't talk about. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, and there are so many edges.
There's so many edges, girl.
And not because people don't want to get it right. Like, it's just not easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just, and I don't think the tension is intended to be completely relieved.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah.
I think sometimes the pressure makes you realize there's a problem. Mm-hmm. So.
It makes you go in prayer to the one who can fix it.
That's right. Get in that prayer closet.
It's supernatural.
Thanks, Janice.
Thank you.